Hey guys, it is Mr. Dave with the Ray Kitty Creation Workshop, and you're watching the Ray Kitty Science Project. Thanks for checking us out again. We're going to kind of continue on this time with some of the concepts that we worked on in previous episodes. So we talked about waves in some of the previous episodes, so if you didn't get a chance to check those out yet, check those out. Now, as far as at home, some of the things that we're doing here today are really just kind of demonstration. I do have some of these laser pointers. You can pick up an inexpensive laser pointer at a dollar store. The dollar store has them for $1.25, and you can get a nice little laser pointer. Now, these ones are a little bit higher test than the ones that you will get at the dollar store, but you can perform some of these same little demonstrations with the little laser from the dollar store. Because we're talking about waves, some of the other one that you can do is I just have a clear glass of water here. So if you want to get a clear glass of water and maybe a piece of paper, I'm going to use this whiteboard here. But if you want to get a clear glass of water, you can do some of the demonstrations we're doing today also. Okay? So when we're talking about waves, last time we were talking about waves, we were talking about mechanical waves. Now, mechanical waves have got to move through something. Okay? They'll move through the atmosphere. They're vibrating and moving that atmosphere around. But electromagnetic waves are the ones we're going to talk about today. Now, electromagnetic waves are a little bit different because they can travel through the vacuum of space. Boom, 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 right? So they can travel through the vacuum of space, and so that's how we get the light from the sun. And we get that energy that comes from the sun down to Earth because they can travel through space. Now, I've given you a little hint as to one of our types of electromagnetic waves, and that is light. Okay? So when we're talking about light, we're going to talk about a couple different aspects of light, but we're going to start off by talking about a different type of wave before we get to light. Now, we're not talking about sound waves because sound waves are mechanical waves like we saw last time. We're actually going to be talking about radio waves. Now, this is just a little emergency radio with a fun little hand crank on it to power it up here. And what we've got is this will receive weather band. Okay, so weather band is a wavelength that is about 6 feet tall. Okay, now you can see this little bitty antenna here. This is not 6 feet tall. But this antenna is able to pick up weather band, okay?
Thunderstorms in the afternoon.
Yeah, really exciting, right? That weather band is a station that is broadcast for emergency purposes, and it is broadcast and it can go over a long distance because of the size of that electromagnetic wave that is a radio wave, okay? So even though that wave is 6 feet tall, we only have to get one little section of it. So like if you were to see that wave, okay, you have that nice little wave, okay, we're going to imagine this is 6 feet tall. Imagination, okay? Our antenna really only has to catch the frequency of that wave, okay? So just like when we saw that wave that was transmitting through the string and transmitting on that stationary wave or that standing wave, it only has to catch a little bit, and that's why maybe you've been, now nowadays it's not as bad, but in my day, when you had your cellular telephone, you would see everybody walking around like this trying to like catch a signal, right? I only have one bar, and so you were trying to catch a signal. Those waves on our phones are a lot smaller, but you are able to catch that signal if you only catch the repeating part of that wave. Okay, so that's pretty important when we're talking about waves, is that no matter the height or the wavelength, right, or the amplification of our wave, we only have to catch part of it in order to be able to transmit that information. Okay, so that's pretty important when you're measuring wavelengths. Okay, so we're talking about electromagnetic waves. Okay, they can travel through space, right? We can get signals from satellites out in space. But radio waves are just part of that. Okay, radio waves, when you're talking about electromagnetic waves, radio waves are huge. They're massive. Like I say, those ones there are about 6 feet tall for that weather band. We have radio waves that are as tall as 3-story buildings. There are huge radio waves, okay? And that radio wave can transmit that energy over a very long distance because of the size of that wave. And if you've got more power, 50,000 watts of hip-hop power or whatever, then you can broadcast that a lot further. So that depends on the energy of that wave. But the radio waves, those big old waves, can transmit for a very long distance, okay? So you've got radio waves down at one side of your electromagnetic spectrum, okay? The next thing on the electromagnetic spectrum, before you get to that light that you can see, okay, when we're talking about electromagnetic spectrum, the next part is infrared light, okay? This is a remote control. This is just a regular one for my receiver at the house, and it is a remote control. It's not a smart remote control. We won't call it dumb, but it's not a smart remote control. This remote control works off of an infrared frequency, okay? So instead of causing a visible light, okay, now the cameras that we're using here in the studio, these fancy cameras, are made to pick up the visible light, okay? Infrared is actually below our visible light, okay? That frequency is lower than our visible light. So you say, okay, well, that's really fun. You're not really seeing anything there. Now, this little bitty camera on my phone is not nearly as fancy as the one you're watching this being recorded on. And depending on your phone, depending on the camera, okay, this can actually translate that infrared light into visible light. So when I'm pushing that power button there, you can actually see that infrared light. Now, it's not broadcasting or it's not showing the infrared. What happens is the infrared tricks this cheapy little camera on here. And when it does, the camera says, oh, I see light, so I need to broadcast that in something that humans can see. So it shows us kind of a purple light. Even though that infrared would be down below red, we're seeing that light there. So infrared is a light that we use in remote controls. We use it in heating things. Infrared light is warm, it can transmit heat. So infrared is your radio waves, your infrared. Then we move into what is called the visible spectrum, okay? The visible spectrum is the light that we can see, okay? So infrared we can't see unless we kind of do some little tricks to manipulate it there. But visible light is the light that we see. Now today we're not going to work quite as much and we're not going to talk quite as much about different colors because your infrared goes from your warm colors, your reds and things like that, all the way up through your nice indigos and purples and things like that. So we're not going to talk as much about color. We're going to kind of move into what is called the propagation of light, okay? The propagation of light says that light likes to move in a straight line, okay? So light always wants to go in a straight line. If you've ever been, we live in beautiful Albuquerque, and we have these wonderful skies where we've got these clouds, and you can see the rays of light coming down from the clouds. Those rays of light, they don't usually just like swim around and move around. They will give us a nice straight line, and that's called the propagation of light. Now, that can be pretty fun when we start playing with and manipulating the propagation of light, okay? So you can actually take and bend light, or you can bounce it back, okay? When you bounce light back, kind of like I've got this mirror here, and you can kind of see my mug in that mirror there, okay? Now, in this mirror, this is a little plasticky mirror, and I have it so that I can warp it and distort it. But in this mirror, you're seeing a reflection of the light bouncing off of me, bouncing off of the mirror, and into the camera there. So the light here is being reflected off of this mirror, Okay, so the reflection of the light is happening here. So the light is bouncing here and to you. Now that doesn't just happen in mirrors, okay? Anytime you're seeing light, anytime you're seeing that reflection, if you are looking at me on the camera here, and what you're actually seeing is the reflected light. Now, like I said, we won't get too deep into our color because I want to have a whole episode all about the fun things with color, but you're actually seeing the light that is being reflected from me to you. So the light is coming off of my bald nugget here. You get this nice little sheen right here, all those little like bright spots, and that is coming off of my head and right to you. That light is being reflected. Reflected light happens on the surface of something, okay? So it happens here on the surface and the light bounces, okay? So remember, light always wants to travel in a straight line, so if we interrupt it, then we can get that different reflection off the surface of something. Now, that's not the only way to manipulate light, okay? We also have something called refraction, okay? Refraction is fun because refraction can actually change light within a substance, okay? Now, you've probably maybe seen this one before, but what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to draw a little arrow on our whiteboard, okay? Now, the arrow, as you can see, is pointing this way, okay? But we're going to refract or bend the light inside of our clear glass here, okay? So we're going to bring the glass in front of it, and we actually see that arrow changing color or changing direction, okay? So what's happening is inside of this, the light is being refracted or bent, okay? So the arrow is pointing that way. Now it's pointing this way, okay? So we can see that change, okay? Because the light inside of our water here is being refracted. It's bent inside of our container. Now this is a fun one to do. You can write your name, you can draw pictures, you can write words backwards, and then, it's a secret mystery, and then you hold a little clear glass in front of it. And that's a fun way of showing refraction, okay, or bending that light. Now, that's really only one way that we bend light. We bend light a lot of different ways, and this has nothing to do with being a light bender, although that would be awesome. But we can bend light some other ways too. I have here what is called a lenticular sheet, okay? A lenticular sheet is a magnifying glass, but as you can see, it is very thin, okay? It works like a lighthouse, okay? There are actually little bitty ridges all over this thin sheet, okay? And yeah, you can kind of hear them there. And those ridges take the light and they will bend the light, and all of that light will be bent into a single point. Now, it works the other way. If the light is coming off of me and then it goes through here, the light leaves a single point, so we can actually see my crazy little, my teeth look pretty nasty when you do it like that. That's gross, yeah. But you can see my beard and you can see everything magnified there through this lenticular lens because the light is coming through, it's being refracted, and it is bending toward my face, okay? So the light is coming here and then towards you. So it's actually looking like it's stretching out my mouth, giving me a big old mouth here, so I can do like an accent. Yeah, anyway, yeah, so the annoying orange thing. But your mouth there is what's happening is we're refracting that light, we're bending it within this thin little layer here and shaping that light, okay? Now you can use that also if you're outside. You can use the light the other way, and you can take the light from the sun and you can concentrate it on a very small area, and you can generate heat. So if you are messing with these, please be careful because it can generate a very hot area. You can ignite little pieces of paper and things like that, but if you are going to mess with something like that, make sure that you've got an adult around so that they are, kind of watching and monitoring that, okay? But this is a lenticular sheet, and we use it to refract light just like a magnifying glass, okay? So Another way that we're going to refract or bend light is through our little bitty crystal here. Okay, this little bitty crystal has a whole bunch of facets, kind of like a diamond. Okay, so we see all of the little facets in our crystal. Okay, now those facets, as you can see, you see different lights that are actually being reflected from all around here in the studio. Down here toward the bottom, you see that nice purple that's coming from somewhere in the room here. Now, the light, like I said, we're not going to get too much into color again, but our light in here is giving us pretty narrow frequencies, so we don't see a full rainbow in there. If we were outside where you have that big old sun, the sun, you can actually shine lots of little rainbows all over the place with something like this using refraction. But we're going to work with these guys here. These are the lasers that I was talking about earlier, okay? So we have our lasers. I've got a purple laser, okay? And I've got a green laser, okay? And I have a red laser, okay? Now, these lasers all will broadcast only one frequency, okay? As I said, we have a whole thing on color coming later, so you're going to have to tune in later about all of the color. But what we're going to do here is I'm going to use my red laser, and I am going to refract it or bend it through our prism here. And when I do, you can see all of those nice little constellation shapes on there. As I move it around, you can almost make out the facets. You can see the triangles that are inside of our crystal by shining it through, by refracting our laser inside of the crystal. So you can see those little facets. You can see those little shapes. We'll try with the green one here. Oh, that's purple. We'll try with the green one. Oh, yeah, look at that. So with our green one here, our green one is showing nice, bright little facets, and we can see all of those little lines as they're shining around there, and we can see it light up our little crystal, okay? As it's lighting up that crystal, the light is actually bouncing around inside of our crystal, and as it's refracting or bouncing around on the inside, we get that nice little constellation effect on our whiteboard there that is showing us the light bending from the point of entry, wherever it touches. It's not reflecting too much, it's refracting. So inside, when it hits an angle, it leaves at a different angle, okay? Just like when we had our arrow on there, our light is being refracted or shined on here, okay? So we're seeing that this crystal does a nice little job of refracting or bending our light, okay? When we shine it through something like these guys here. Now, these are not to be mistaken for the eclipse glasses that everybody will be buying hundreds of thousands of in a couple weeks. These are the opposite. These are like firework glasses. You get these sometimes like at Meow Wolf, or you will get these, when it's time for fireworks or something like that. But what happens here is on these, there is a very, very small or slight gradient. Okay, and so it has little bitty slits in it. Okay, so there are little bitty slits and little bitty slots in these glasses here. And these glasses are made for when you wear them, you see nice little rainbows and things. But what's fun with these glasses is if we take our laser, okay, and when we're looking onto our whiteboard here, when we shine our laser on our whiteboard, we see that we have a single dot, right? But when you shine it through this refraction lens, you can see that you've got a nice grid of those lights. Now, you may have seen this on the side of people's houses as their Christmas light display, and it looks like there are thousands of little bitty lasers in there, but what you actually have is that refraction grid. And what it's doing is it is taking that light and it's separating it up into a whole bunch of little dots by refracting the light. It's bending the light into a whole bunch of little dots. Now, there's some fun science on this one here, that when they first discovered that this can happen, when you're talking about waves and particles and all those kind of things. So if you want to kind of explore that science a little bit, it's pretty fun working with a slit of paper, and they discovered that one light will give us lots of little points of light. But when we're refracting that light, you may be able to see, when you look at these lens, or this lens on the camera, you may be able to see that kind of reflection of the light there, and it gives us that nice, beautiful rainbow. Yeah, that rainbow is because that refraction grid is spreading that light in all different directions, right? And we've got different thicknesses, so it works just on that nanoscale, just like the oil slick in a parking lot. We can see that the reflection, right, not the refraction, but the reflection is giving us a nice, beautiful little rainbow on those lenses, okay? So we can refract through these here, and that gives us that nice colors, right, that we get there. Now, our different color lasers, another fun kind of thing that you can do with these lasers is I've got two beakers here. I have the one that I showed you earlier that we've got our water in, and I have a slightly different substance in this one here. Now, if you've ever come to any Ray Kitty class, you know just because I have a liquid doesn't mean that it is clear, does not mean that it is drinkable. You always want to know what is in something before you consume it, before you get it on you, before you spill it on your cat, okay? So, this one here, I happen to know what's in here, and I do know that this one is regular water from the tap, okay? So this is tap water. This is a special type of material, and we'll talk about that one in just a minute. Now, our propagation of light, right, that we're working with, how we saw our light, that single beam, that single little laser is able to flow or wave in a little straight line, giving us that single beam of light. Now, you can't see the light between A and B here, right? You don't see any light. You see the light on my hand. You see the light maybe just a little bit on the tip of the laser, but that's really all you see there. That's because there's not enough particles in the atmosphere here to reflect it towards you. Okay, remember, the light that you see is the light that's being reflected at you. So what I've got here is some regular old water. This is just water, okay? And we are going to take this water, and I'm going to spray it in the air, okay? Now, when I do, this water is going to leave little bitty droplets in the air. See? Yeah, that's pretty fun. And it's going to put the droplets in the air. They'll float there for just a second as they're sinking down. But our laser, right, that we can't see now, that little bitty droplets of water are going to give us enough that we can actually see that laser, okay? And now what we're seeing is the light being reflected off of those little bitty drops of water. Or actually, off of one side it's being reflected, off the other side it's being refracted. So we can actually see that laser beam so that we can do that crazy little like dance thing to avoid all the laser beams so we can get in and steal that big old diamond, right? Because that's what you're always after. That's how I got this one. Either that or like I got it on the internet. But that light there is now being reflected so that you can see it when we spray that water on there, okay? So then we're actually able to see that laser. Now, okay, we see it in the droplets of water that are in the sky, so we should be able to see it in our water here, right? So let's shine that laser into our water. Now, you can see it reflecting off of the side, but you really don't see much of the beam itself. Now, you see the beam occasionally. I'm going to turn it around so my little label's not in the way. On the bubbles in the water, you can kind of see that beam, right? But mainly you just kind of see where it's bouncing off the edges of our beaker, right? If I hit it just the right spot, our beaker kind of glows a little bit, but you can kind of see that reflecting there, but you don't see too much of that laser. The same thing when I go with our red, right? You really don't see much of that laser, even less than you did of the green there. And same thing with our blue or purple, okay? Now, what's fun is when we switch over to this one here, okay? Now, before we do, I want to say that we've now visited our radio waves, our infrared, our visible light. Now we're going to go to ultraviolet light, okay? Ultraviolet light is on the other side. It is a higher frequency wavelength. So when we shine our red light into this material here, we see the same thing. We kind of see it bouncing off of the side a little bit. When we shine our green light onto this material here, we can kind of see the beam just a little bit. But what we want to do is we want to introduce ultraviolet light. Okay? Now, when we do, and I shine the ultraviolet light into my beaker here, oh, look at that. We have those Star Wars laser beams going on there, and we can very easily see that light in our material. Okay? What we have here is ultraviolet light. And this ultraviolet light is actually being or energizing the material in my beaker. Okay? It doesn't do it with the regular water. Okay? But when we have this beaker here, we can actually energize it with our ultraviolet laser. And we see those little laser beams that are being bounced around in my beaker. Okay? So what is happening there is this has something in it called quinine. Okay? This is tonic water. It's very drinkable, but it's not very yummy. But let me show you something else here. When we're talking about ultraviolet light, I have a nice bright ultraviolet light here. Okay? And you can see it kind of lighten up my shirt a little bit. And my teeth look nasty. And my eyeballs look nasty. Yeah. So what happens is the quinine that is in here, look at that beautiful glow. The ultraviolet light actually energizes that quinine, and it emits a photon that we can actually see. So it fluoresces when it's exposed to that ultraviolet light. Just like that ultraviolet laser, this black light or UV light is now energizing my whole bottle here. So it looks like the light is actually coming from this bottle because it's fluorescing from that ultraviolet light. Now, a fun thing about that, if you're getting ready for whatever, anytime you go, you're like, hey, you went to a party or something like that, and they mark something on your hand, you can see that ultraviolet light. This is just a little highlighter. But we can see that highlighter has a compound in it, like that quinine, to where we get that nice glow from the ultraviolet light. Okay? So, we saw here that we went from our radio waves, okay, in our electromagnetic spectrum, and we went all the way up radio waves, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet. Past that, you've got your gamma rays, your X-rays, all that kind of stuff. But what we're really talking about now is that visible spectrum and the things that are just on either side of it. Okay, so this is our electromagnetic spectrum that we're talking about today, and that are those wavelengths that can travel through the vacuum of space. All right, guys, I am Mr. Dave. You are watching the Ray Kitty Science Project. Thank you for enjoying it with us here today. And don't forget that science shows you matter.